Good morning from Kerner Country. I'm Claire Murphy. Welcome to the Solo Bureau. You may have noticed I'm coming to you from a different location this morning. I'm in Adelaide today. Spent the weekend with my bestie and a crew I've known for approximately, it feels like 800 years, and who know way too much about me to ever allow them to become enemies. I hope you have a similar group around you that you've collected over the years, because nothing fills the soul cup quite like a very good dose of humbling from someone who can roast you over things you did as a 14-year-old. So as I sit in my parents' upstairs lounge room this morning, let me tell you about what we'll all be doing, and maybe have already done, tomorrow. Because tomorrow is Census Day, the day we all fill out a form and tell the government things about us as a population. Coming up, we'll tell you about the conspiracies around it, the purpose of it, and what things can really happen after all those numbers are crunched. But first things first, let's see what's been happening while you were sleeping. It's Monday, August 10. Police are investigating after a body was found in a suitcase in southern New South Wales. Officers were called to Walgan Road at Olin, around 60 kilometres southeast of Goulburn, just before 1 p.m. yesterday, finding a body that had been placed inside the suitcase. They are yet to identify the victim, police saying they believe the body is female. Support for Labor is at its lowest point since 2013, right before Kevin Rudd replaced Julia Gillard in an attempt to salvage the election. According to the latest news poll, primary support for the government dropped to 29%, down from 33% in June. The poll has Pauline Hanson's One Nation level with Labor, but also down 1 point from June. The coalition remains far behind on a near record low of 18%. On a two-party preferred basis, Labor leads 58 to 42 from the LNP. Parliament resumes tomorrow, with the government facing a tough battle to pass key legislation, including contentious gambling reforms and National Disability Insurance Scheme cuts, as they attempt to revive their flagging support. 2 Sydney airport staff have been stood down after a Jetstar and a Qatar Airways plane were involved in a near-miss incident on the tarmac at Sydney Airport. The Jetstar plane heading to the Gold Coast was taxiing to the runway when it had to brake suddenly to avoid colliding with the Qatar aircraft just before 7 a.m. Both planes had to come to an abrupt halt. Air traffic control had been operating under restrictions between 6 a.m. and 8 a.m. due to staff shortages blamed on rostering restraints. It reduced the number of flights that could take off and land. The air traffic ground controller and a tug operator have now both been stood down as an investigation into the incident gets underway. Both Ukraine and Russia have accused each other of lethal attacks over the weekend. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accusing Moscow of targeting global food security by striking Odessa's seaport. Zelensky said Odessa's seaport had been damaged by strikes, with authorities saying dozens of drones and missiles hit the city, wounding a dozen people. Odessa's seaports are the gateway for Ukraine's vast agricultural exports to reach the world. Zelensky has also claimed that Russia has signed an agreement with North Korea to send up to 50,000 troops to assist in fighting. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has rejected the 15-point Gaza peace plan. Under the US-backed Board of Peace roadmap, Hamas, based in the Gaza Strip, would disarm in return for the withdrawal of the Israeli military from the enclave. The weapons Hamas surrendered would remain under Palestinian control, Israel rejecting the plan, insisting that the weapons be removed from Palestinian territory entirely. The Board of Peace stated that it expects Israel to make a complete withdrawal from the coastal enclave only after Hamas had been disarmed, with a Palestinian transitional administration supported by an international stabilisation force then taking control of administration and security as the Israeli military withdrew. The mayor of Nagasaki has used the 81st anniversary of the atomic bomb being dropped on the city to call for the abolition of nuclear weapons while criticising countries that use them as a deterrent. In a televised speech, Mayor Shiro Suzuki said nuclear weapons are not a necessary evil, but an absolute evil, and can never coexist with humanity. He also called on the Japanese government to maintain the 3 non-nuclear principles adopted as a resolution by the Japanese Parliament in 1971, but were never incorporated into Japanese law, which are not to possess, produce or allow nuclear weapons to be brought into the country. The US dropped a plutonium-fuelled atomic bomb nicknamed Fat Man on Nagasaki on August 9, 1945, killing about 40,000 people instantly. 3 days earlier, they'd dropped a similar bomb called Little Boy on Hiroshima, where an estimated 80,000 people were killed. The bombings led to Japan announcing their surrender to the Allied powers on August 15, ending World War II. Hundreds of cyclists have ridden through the streets of Berlin without a stitch of clothing to promote nudism as a lifestyle choice. In the warm and sunny conditions, the riders headed along a 30-kilometre route following the former Berlin Wall and past major government buildings in order to celebrate the diversity of human bodies. The nudist movement has fallen significantly in numbers in Germany in recent decades, from around 656,000 members in the 90s to just 34,000. On what would have been her 63rd birthday, Barbie has honoured the late Whitney Houston with her own doll. Replicating the singer's look from the I Wanna Dance With Somebody Who Loves Me music video, the doll is wearing a bodycon dress, the same big colourful earrings, white and blue heels with that signature 80s fringe and long curly hair. The doll was revealed during the 5th annual Whitney Houston Legacy of Love Gala, a benefit held to support the late singer's foundation. Those are today's top stories. Next, it's almost Census Day. But why do we even need it? The weekend before last, Geraldine sent me a DM on Instagram. She'd seen a message doing the rounds on social media warning people that a group of people are going door to door pretending to be from Home Affairs, armed with documents claiming they needed to verify everyone's ID for the upcoming census. The conspiracy goes that those people will eventually return and rob your home, but not before they steal your identity with the ID and even fingerprints that they scared out of you at your very own front door. Now, I reached out to both police and the ABS, the Australian Bureau of Statistics, about this. There have been no official reports to police regarding these supposed crimes. The ABS told me that they do have officers out in the community. They're handing out census forms and conducting a survey. They are very clearly displaying ABS census badges, not Home Affairs, and they will never ask anyone for financial information, passwords, or fingerprints. Now, word is that these warnings that do the rounds on social media at census time are coming from actors who believe the census is a form of mass surveillance and they are actually trying to scare people into not participating. They may also post fake advice, like suggesting the census form can be ignored because when it's addressed only to the resident and not an actual name, that it is not a legal document. That is also not true. So what does the census actually do? Well, firstly, it's akin to demographers' Christmas. And that's why we have Liz Allen joining us today. She used to work at the ABS, but is now a demographer at the Polis Centre for Social Policy and Research at ANU. Welcome to the Solo Bureau, Liz.
Great to be with you.
Liz, can we start off by just getting a quick definition on what it is a demographer actually does?
Oh my goodness, you've started with the most difficult question. um, Look, a demographer is concerned with all things population, in particular the trends and dynamics of population change. Traditionally, demography as a discipline and demographers have been concerned about the kind of things like births, deaths, migration, and the nuts and bolts of how the composition of our population changes and so on. I tend to take a different tact or make the discipline of demography my own by looking more kind of at a historical point of view and also using those skills of demography to understand the building blocks of us as a people and consider where we're going and how we can maximise well-being among all people.
Well, we're going to find out why the census then is so very, very vital for the work that you do. But before we do that, what is the census? Most of us would know it, I would presume, because this is how I know the census other than having to fill out the forms myself in the past, is when you watch TV shows like Who Do You Think You Are? They go back to census records to find your ancient relatives. But what is the census?
Yeah, so in Australia, we don't have that historical archival data when it comes to census records. And that's because we've tended to destroy census questionnaire forms after we've completed it. It wasn't until the archive project, the time capsule, that enabled us to opt for the release of our forms after 99 years or so. So we haven't come to that period yet, but I'm hopeful that at one point we'll be able to see that sort of thing. But what does the census do? So the census is effectively a questionnaire, and it's the same questionnaire for every single household in Australia. And the census is about understanding how many people are in the country and where and how we live. What's crucial about the census is that it is a mandated process under an act to ensure that when it comes to electoral boundaries and the reckoning of taxation and other things, that we have reliable population numbers to be able to do that. So, census is a crucial part of informing the very basic kind of democracy of a function of Australia. But even more than that, census informs all manner of things from the roads and transportation to schools, education, health, healthcare provision, the water, the sewerage, the electricity, specific targeted programs to particular population subgroups and so on.
So can we drill down into that just to give an example? So say, for example, the census goes out and a certain area shows that they have a lot of very young children and babies in that particular area. What would that then inform, say, the local government or whatever levels of government about that particular area and what it needs?
Well, it will need vital infrastructure. Does the education infrastructure support the needs of the population now and into the future? What about healthcare provision? Are there suitable clinics to enable childhood immunisation? Are there services for parents and families to be supported and so on? And then businesses. Well, businesses look at the census data as well to understand the demographics of an area now and into the future and the viability of different ventures. But something to note, this is a really interesting key point of the census. Among the kind of commonly misunderstood facets of the census is that babies must be included on the census form. And in fact, some folks, you just think about it, you've just had a baby. The baby may not be crawling and moving around. And so you just kind of refer to it as the baby and making plans for the babies. Like, you're not booking a restaurant accommodate the seating for this baby. We often leave them off the census. Do not leave your babies off the census. It's easy to do. It is a commonly done thing. They must be included because if you think about it, the babies of today or the babies of census night will be 5 in a number of years' time. And we need to ensure that there are sufficient preschool, childcare, and primary school arrangements for them in the future.
Why do we still do it though? Because not every country still does a census, do they?
No, indeed. So Australia is in the kind of growing minority in the world whereby we still hold a traditional census and we're still holding a traditional census every 5 years. That's growing more and more uncommon. Certainly at the moment, if you were to look at the US and the UK, they are 10-yearly censuses. So Australia has the gold standard when it comes to census data. But countries like New Zealand starting to move away from traditional census taking, and as a result, are moving to sample surveys to understand general kind of patterns and so on. And alongside those samples will be augmented data coming from things like the tax office and other government health and welfare data and so on. So that's where New Zealand's headed. I imagine that's where Australia will be headed in the not too distant future. At the moment, we don't have a population register. China, the Netherlands, and Sweden have population registers. We've tended to stay away from those things. Whether or not we'll have one in the future, I'm not sure. But it's likely that administrative data will be used in the future, if not already, to consider how to ensure the accuracy of census.
So you mentioned before that we tended to destroy the forms once they were done, but what happens, because it's not all done via paper form these days. Mine tells me I've got a little rego number on it and I can log in and actually just do it via the online form. And I can even do it not even on the day because if I know who's going to be in my house on Tuesday, August 11, then I can fill it out already. But what happens to all that data? We have learnt so much in recent years how important and how much we should protect our data. What happens to it?
Yeah, so you're right. The ABS is expecting around 85% of us will complete our forms online. And that's why the ABS has taken a different tact this year. We're being sent out details of how to complete it online, but also information on how to request a hard copy. Others in hard to reach places will have received the full hard copy from the get go. And that's for environmental reasons and cost savings and so on, but also to reflect our current behaviour. So, if we think about the hard copy form, what actually happens is there's actually a job, by the way, within the ABS for a guillotine operator. And that guillotine operator is there to separate the pages of the form. And what happens is the information about our address and our name are separated from the rest of the details. That is destroyed and it's never held alongside our responses. When it comes to the online, the majority of our data, what will happen is that the technical business term is functionally separate. So what will happen is that information will go into the ABS system. There is a whole suite of fancy protections by way of encryption and technological advancements and so on. And the same sort of thing applies, but not in the hard copy. So our name and our address are held functionally separate to our responses. And the ABS is covered by numerous acts that ensure confidentiality and the privacy of our data so that we cannot be identified within the data.
Why is it compulsory? It's a bit like voting, right? So if we don't vote, you get slapped with a bit of a fine. The same thing happens for this, right?
Indeed. So the very premise of census taking is that we need to have full coverage. And what happens is if we don't have full or the best level of coverage, we start to see participation mean that low participation mean that representativeness is adversely impacted. And that's what happened in New Zealand. The level of representativeness has declined because participation has dwindled. And the most affected populations in terms of underrepresentation in New Zealand were among the Maori population and other minority populations. What that then meant is that the data became not really of the quality that is required. And so we need to ensure that we have that quality of data that enables a representative view of all of us. So it does need to be mandatory. It's kind of our civic duty. It's almost like I see it as a reciprocal relationship. If you're driving on the roads, if you're connected to the electricity, you're using the water, you're using other services, and if you're by virtue of existing in Australia, you ought to help out here and complete this process because the lack of completion may not directly affect you, but it may affect others. There have been calls to boycott the census because of fears around responding to the number of rooms question in the census. That's a vital component of understanding homelessness. The definition of homelessness in Australia is quite broad and it needs to be. And that's to enable couch surfing folks to be identified. And the way that the ABS does that is by looking at the number of occupants in the house versus the number of rooms. If there is severe overcrowding, then there's likely homelessness in that particular home.
Can we talk about one of the questions? Because there's some new ones. Is there a new one or new ones in this census?
There are two new questions and there are tweaks to other questions. So the new questions, these are the ones that are probably causing the most controversy. And they are around sexual orientation and gender. Gender not to be confused with sex, because sex is still there. Gender is being added. And it's important to note that just like religion, the question of sexual orientation and the question of gender are the only voluntary or optional questions in the entire survey. And more importantly, it's only asked of 16-year-olds and over, and you can choose to respond to the categories or tick the box where you prefer not to say.
Now, Liz, I have referenced Census Day like Demographer Christmas. Would you support that statement? And I would like to know what your favourite data set from a census is.
Oh.
Do you have one, or are there too many children to choose from?
I was just about to say, you're asking me to choose a favourite child, which is something a parent should never, ever do. But I might give it a crack. It's a toss-up. Is it census that is Christmas Day, or is it the data comes, Demographer's Christmas? Look, either way, we get to celebrate, all right? And it is it does feel like a religious festival. Apart from the kind of the festivities of, oh my goodness, data, for me, it's about being seen in the national family photograph. And it's that one time in every 5 years where we can stop as a nation and go, everyone else is doing the same thing as me. That feels pretty special.
Oh, I didn't think about it that way.
Yeah. It's like we're reflecting on us, and it's a moment to pause and go, this is who we are. And when everything feels so grim in, the globally and the media cycle, it's nice to just think, as a nation, we're pausing together. And I just think that is something strong and civic building that we can all get behind. And what's my favourite data? Oh, the data I most tend to use is looking at changes in population over time. So I'm not just looking at 1 year census, I'm looking at the rates of change, particularly around, say, for example, growth or age, and other factors that indicate diversity. And with this census, it is the most progressive census we've seen yet in this country. We will see, because of those additions to the census, more diversity come through by virtue of the data items. But our country is diversifying in a number of ways, like family type, living arrangements, and so on. And so I'm really keen to look at that next snapshot of all of us in all our glory as the national family of Australia.
That is such a beautiful way to look at it. I'm also looking forward to when the data comes out and whoever is behind the ABS Stats Instagram account gets their hands on it, because they break it down in the most hilarious ways. Liz, thank you so much for taking us through the importance of the census and what we can get out of it. I appreciate you sharing this with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So remember earlier when I said there is a fine for not filling out your census form? In Australia, under the Census and Statistics Act of 1905, you can be fined up to $364 per day if you ignore a formal written legal direction to submit your form. Providing false information risks a fine of up to $3,640. Thanks for taking the time to hang out with me today, team. Loving your comments and ratings on the apps. Thank you to Kate Mobbs, who wrote that she's loving the whip around the country on Fridays. Now, that happened because you all told me that's what you want to hear on this show, that you want more from around Australia, not just have it very East Coast focused. I'm actually going to put another poll up soon to ask you how many ads you think is okay to run in this show, because I want to get an understanding from you as to what will be okay and not just, piss you off at the same time. So I can actually afford to live, but also not alienate you at the very same time. I'll pop that poll up soon, so make sure you keep an eye out for it. Until tomorrow, have a tops day, friends. I'll catch you then.